The storm hit Cascade Falls at 11:47 p.m., the exact moment I decided to take the shortcut through Miller's Alley, a decision that would unravel my carefully constructed life thread by thread. Rain came down in sheets so thick I could barely see 3 feet ahead, each drop hitting the pavement like a bullet, creating a deafening roar that swallowed every other sound. The wind howled through the narrow alley between the old brick buildings, pushing against me with enough force that I had to lean into it just to keep moving forward. My scrubs were soaked through despite my raincoat, the thin fabric clinging to my skin like a second layer I couldn't peel off. Water poured from a broken gutter above, creating a waterfall I had to dodge, my sneakers squelching with each step. I should have taken Main Street, should have stayed on the lit roads where other people might be stupid enough to be out in weather like this. But Main Street added 15 minutes to my walk home, and after a 12-hour shift at Cascade General followed by another 4 hours at the urgent care clinic, every minute felt like an eternity. My feet ached. My back ached. Even my thoughts ached, sluggish and heavy with exhaustion. 3 years. That's how long I'd been in Cascade Falls. How long since I'd fled Chicago and the life that nearly destroyed me. 3 years of keeping my head down, working double shifts, living in a cottage barely bigger than a storage unit, and telling myself it was enough. That safety was enough. That anonymity was everything. The alley was darker than I remembered, the single streetlight at the far end flickering like it might give up entirely. Dumpsters lined one side, their lids rattling in the wind, and the smell of rot mixed with rain-soaked cardboard made my nose wrinkle. I pulled my medical bag closer to my chest, a habit I'd developed, always keeping it within reach. You never knew when someone might need help, my mother used to say. She'd been a nurse too, back before the accident that took both my parents when I was 19. I was halfway through the alley when I saw him. At first, I thought it was just trash, another heap of discarded something propped against the brick wall. But trash didn't slump like that, didn't have the shape of broad shoulders and long legs. Trash didn't wear suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My steps faltered. Every instinct I'd honed over 3 years of hiding screamed at me to keep walking, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, to get home and lock my doors and forget. But my feet stopped moving anyway, rooted to the wet pavement as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. He was leaning against the wall at an angle that couldn't be comfortable, head tilted back, face partially obscured by shadows and rain. One hand pressed against his side, and even from 10 feet away, I could see the dark stains spreading across his white shirt, too dark to be water, too thick. Blood. The rain was washing it down the brick in rivulets, creating patterns like abstract art on the old red surface. My breath caught in my throat. Every cell in my body screamed to run, to get away from whatever violence had happened here, whatever might still be happening. Shooters didn't always leave. Sometimes they stayed to make sure the job was finished. But I was already moving forward, my medical training overriding every survival instinct I'd developed. My hands were already reaching for my bag, already running through the assessment checklist drilled into me during residency. Airway, breathing, circulation. Scene safety first, except I was ignoring that rule completely, wasn't I? I knelt beside him, the cold water soaking through my scrubs immediately, and my fingers found his neck, searching for a pulse. For a moment, nothing. Just the rain and my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then there, weak but steady, a flutter beneath my fingertips that meant he was still alive. "Can you hear me?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I'm a doctor. I'm going to help you." His eyelids flickered but didn't open. Up close, I could see more. Strong jaw darkened with stubble, sharp cheekbones, a nose that looked like it had been broken at least once and healed slightly crooked. Water dripped from dark hair that would probably be perfectly styled under different circumstances. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom or an expensive restaurant, not bleeding out in an alley during the worst storm of the season. My hands moved automatically, checking his wound. Gunshot right side just above his hip. I pressed gently, and he groaned, a low sound of pain that made something twist in my chest. The bullet had gone through, I could feel the exit wound at his back. Lucky. If it had hit an organ, he'd already be dead. "You need a hospital," I said, already reaching for my phone. His hand shot out faster than I would have thought possible for someone in his condition, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. His eyes opened then, and I found myself staring into darkness. Not black, not quite brown, but something in between that seemed to absorb the dim light around us. "No." His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper, but the command in it was absolute. "No hospital. You've been shot. You need... They'll find me." His grip on my wrist tightened, almost painful. "Leave. Dangerous." I should have listened. Should have pulled away, called 911 anyway. Let the professionals handle whatever mess this man had gotten himself into. But something in his eyes held me frozen. Not fear exactly, but a desperate plea beneath the command. And something else, recognition maybe, or just the knowledge that we were the same. Both of us running from something, both of us hiding. "I'm a doctor," I said again, softer this time. "Let me help you." His eyes searched mine for what felt like an eternity. Rain streaming down both our faces, the storm howling around us. Finally, his grip loosened, and his hand fell away. "No hospital," he repeated, and then his eyes rolled back, and he went limp. For 3 heartbeats, I just knelt there, rain soaking me to the bone, staring at the stranger who just made a terrible decision trusting me. Then instinct kicked in, and I was assessing again. Still breathing, pulse still there, but bleeding, and I had no way to stop it here in the alley. The decision made itself. Or maybe I'd already made it the moment I knelt beside him. My car was parked 2 blocks away at the clinic. Getting him there would be nearly impossible. He had to weigh at least 200 pounds, and I was 5'6" on a good day. But leaving him here meant watching him die, and 3 years of hiding hadn't killed my medical oath yet. I hooked my arms under his shoulders and pulled. He was dead weight, unconscious and soaked through, and my feet slipped on the wet pavement. Muscle memory from years of moving patients kicked in. Use your legs, not your back. Find the balance point. Keep moving even when it feels impossible. We made it 3 feet before I had to stop, gasping for breath, my arms screaming. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it felt like the sky was splitting open. In the distance, barely audible over the storm, sirens wailed. I pulled again, dragging him inch by inch down the alley. His expensive watch caught what little light there was, gleaming even covered in blood and rain. His shoes left drag marks in the water pooling on the pavement. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I registered these details. The quality of his clothes, the calluses on his knuckles that spoke of someone who knew how to fight, the way even unconscious he seemed to radiate danger. I'd moved to Cascade Falls to disappear, to become nobody, to live a quiet life where the most exciting thing that happened was the occasional fishing boat accident or tourist with food poisoning. And here I was, dragging a bleeding stranger into my car like some kind of getaway driver, throwing away 3 years of careful invisibility in one impulsive moment of compassion. My car came into view, and I'd never been so grateful to see my beat-up Honda. I fumbled for my keys with numb fingers, popped the trunk first. No way was I getting him into the back seat. Then reconsidered. The trunk was full of emergency supplies, and I needed him where I could monitor him. Back seat it was. I managed to prop the door open, then half-dragged, half-lifted him inside. His head lolled against the leather, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he'd stopped breathing. But no, still there, still alive, still my responsibility now. I just shut the door when headlights swept across the alley entrance. A police cruiser, moving slowly, searchlight cutting through the rain. My heart stopped. I dropped below the window line, one hand automatically covering the stranger's mouth, even though he was unconscious. His lips were cold under my palm, his breath shallow against my skin. The light passed over the car, lingered for a moment that stretched into eternity, then moved on. I heard the cruiser's engine fade into the storm, and only then did I remember to breathe. When I pulled my hand away, his eyes were open again, just barely, focused on my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. We stayed like that, frozen in the intimate space of my back seat, rain drumming on the roof, his blood on my hands, something unspoken passing between us. Then his eyes closed again, and I was alone with my racing heart and the unconscious stranger and the knowledge that I just crossed a line I could never uncross. I got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pointed my car toward home. I woke to the smell of coffee, which was wrong on every level because I lived alone and never programmed my ancient coffee maker the night before. My eyes snapped open, and for a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember why my back ached from sleeping on the couch, why my clothes smelled like antiseptic and blood, why my hands were stained dark around the nail beds despite scrubbing them raw. Then memory crashed back. The storm, the alley, the stranger bleeding out on my kitchen table, now sleeping in my bed. I sat up too fast, my spine protesting, and found him standing in my kitchen doorway, shirtless, one hand braced against the frame for support. The bandage I'd wrapped around his torso last night was stark white against his olive skin, and in the morning light streaming through my windows, I could see everything I'd only felt in the darkness. The scars that crisscrossed his chest and abdomen like a roadmap of violence. The tattoos I'd glimpsed, Roman numerals stark against his ribs, some kind of family crest on his shoulder blade, names on his forearm that had been deliberately obscured, covered over with thick black ink. He looked like a Renaissance painting of a fallen angel, beautiful and dangerous and so completely out of place in my tiny cottage that I almost laughed. "You should be in bed," I said, finding my voice. "You should have better locks." He pushed off the door frame with a barely suppressed wince. "I could break into this place with a credit card. Most people in Cascade Falls don't need Fort Knox security. You do now." The weight of those 3 words settled over me like a blanket of snow, cold and suffocating. He was right, of course. Whatever danger he carried had followed him here, into my sanctuary, and there was no pretending otherwise. I stood, my muscles protesting, and moved past him into the kitchen, needing the familiar routine of pouring coffee, adding cream, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. He followed, slower, and lowered himself into one of my mismatched chairs with the careful precision of someone intimate with pain. "You live alone," he said. "Not a question. Obviously. No photos. No personal items. Nothing that says who you were before you came here." His dark eyes tracked me across the small space. "You're hiding too, aren't you?" My hand tightened on the mug. "I like my privacy." "Privacy?" He almost smiled. "Is that what we're calling it?" I set down my coffee harder than necessary. "You need to leave. As soon as you can walk without bleeding, you need to go." Agreed. Something about his easy acquiescence bothered me more than an argument would have. I busied myself making toast, scrambling eggs, falling back into the mechanical motions of normalcy even though nothing about this situation was normal. We ate in silence, and I caught him watching me with a curiosity that felt invasive, like he was cataloging every movement, every tell, reading me the way I'd read his body last night on my table. "The tattoo," I said finally, unable to stop myself. "The numbers on your ribs. What do they mean?" His fork stilled halfway to his mouth. For a long moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, the day everything changed. Changed how? But the vulnerability in his eyes shuttered immediately, replaced by that calculating darkness I'd seen in the alley. "We all have days we'd rather forget, Dotteressa." The word doctor in his language felt intimate somehow, more personal than my name would have. His phone, fully charged and sitting on my counter, started buzzing. Once, twice, a dozen times in rapid succession. I watched the screen light up with notifications. Angelo. Marco. Don Castellano. Don. I knew that word, knew what it meant even though I'd never moved in those circles. My ex had arrested men who answered to Dons, had come home bragging about busting up operations, about putting away soldiers and capos and underbosses. Dominic moved fast despite his injury, grabbing the phone, his face tightening with pain at the sudden motion. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Really?" He met my eyes and something passed between us, some recognition that we'd moved past the point of comfortable lies. "Someone you should probably fear. I don't scare easily." "No." His lips quirked, almost a smile. "You don't. That's what worries me." He took the phone into my bedroom and I told myself I wouldn't listen, that I'd respect his privacy the way I'd respected it last night when I'd found his wallet. But my feet carried me to the closed door anyway, and I pressed my ear against the wood, hardly breathing. His voice came through muffled but clear, speaking in rapid-fire words I couldn't understand but recognized as the same language he'd murmured in his delirium. Then, cutting through the unfamiliar sounds, words I did understand. "Find them. Make it permanent." My blood went cold. Make it permanent. The euphemism was clear enough. When he emerged 10 minutes later, I was standing exactly where he'd left me, and he knew immediately that I'd heard. "You're ordering someone killed," I said flatly. "I'm ensuring my people stay alive. There's a difference. Not in my world." He moved closer and I forced myself not to step back. "You want to judge me? Fine. But you saved my life last night knowing I was dangerous. You don't get to pretend to be shocked now. How soon can you leave?" Something flickered in his eyes, gone too fast to name. Hurt, maybe, or just disappointment. "Soon as possible, Dotteressa." The word felt different this time, colder, and I hated that it bothered me. I grabbed my coat, my bag, my keys. "I'm going to work. Don't answer the door. Don't go outside. Just..." I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the strange protectiveness I felt despite everything. "Just stay alive until you can leave." The clinic was a 20-minute walk, and I spent every second of it trying to convince myself that when I got home, he'd be gone. That this would all be some bizarre fever dream I could file away and forget. But the universe had other plans. Mrs. Chan, the clinic receptionist, pulled me aside the moment I walked in, her weathered face creased with concern. "Elena, there were men here asking about you." My heart stopped. Men? 2 of them. Dark suits, fancy car. They had accents not from around here. They were asking if any doctors had treated gunshot wounds recently, if anyone had come in during the storm. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, of course. But they seemed very interested in you specifically." She lowered her voice. "Are you in some kind of trouble, dear?" "No." I lied, the word bitter on my tongue. "No trouble." But trouble was exactly what I was in, and it was multiplying by the hour. I made it through my shift on autopilot, treating sprained ankles and ear infections and carefully avoiding the news playing on the waiting room TV. But I caught enough in passing. "Body found in the city. Execution style. Connected to organized crime." The words washed over me like ice water, and I thought about the man in my cottage, about the cold certainty in his voice when he'd given those orders. I was complicit now. Whether I liked it or not, I'd chosen a side. The grocery store was my last stop before home, and I felt eyes on me the entire time. A man in a black jacket lingering too long in the produce section. Another by the checkout, pretending to read a magazine but watching everyone who came through. Small towns had rhythms, patterns. You learned to recognize who belonged and who didn't. These men didn't belong. I paid for milk and bread I didn't need and walked home fast. My hand wrapped around the scalpel I'd slipped into my coat pocket. The afternoon light was fading, shadows stretching long across the street, and by the time I reached my cottage, my nerves were vibrating with tension. The front door was ajar. I'd locked it. I knew I'd locked it because I'd checked it twice, paranoid and careful the way I'd learned to be. My hand closed around the scalpel as I pushed the door open slowly, every muscle tense to run. The living room was a disaster. Couch cushions thrown, drawers pulled open, my carefully ordered life torn apart by searching hands. And in the kitchen, Dominic stood with a gun in his hand, his shirt dark with fresh blood, staring down at 2 men lying unconscious on my floor, their hands bound with what looked like my curtain cords. His eyes met mine across the wreckage of my home, and something in his expression cracked, just for a moment, before hardening into that impenetrable mask. "They came looking," he said simply. "Found more than they expected." 5 days passed in a strange bubble of domesticity that had no business existing in my life. Mornings became a ritual. I'd wake on the couch. I'd given up pretending I'd reclaim my bed while he was here, and find him already awake, sitting by the window with coffee, watching the street with the vigilance of someone who'd survived by never letting his guard down. I'd change his bandages while the sun rose, my fingers learning the landscape of his skin, the way his muscles tensed when I pressed too hard, the way his breathing changed when my touch lingered. He was healing faster than he should have, but men like him probably always did. The body learned to repair itself quickly when death was a constant companion. The days fell into patterns neither of us acknowledged. He worked from my tiny kitchen table, laptop open to screens I didn't ask about, phone pressed to his ear speaking in rapid bursts of his native language that I understood better than he knew. I'd studied it in medical school, thinking I might work with doctors without borders in Italy someday. That dream had died in Chicago, but the language remained, and I caught more of his conversations than he realized. Evenings we cooked. Or rather, he cooked and I learned, watching his scarred hands move with surprising grace as he taught me to make pasta from scratch, telling stories about his grandmother while flour dusted the air between us. "She was the only soft thing in my childhood," he said one night, his fingers showing mine how to fold the dough. "Everyone else was hard edges and harder lessons. But Nana, she'd sneak me cookies and tell me stories about the old country, about honor and family and protecting what's yours. Is that why you do this?" I asked. I gestured vaguely, encompassing his world, his choices, the violence that clung to him like cologne. "I do this because my father was killed when I was 16, and someone had to protect my sister." His hands stilled on the dough. "I do this because the alternative was letting men like Salvatore turn our operations into something that traffics children and poisons neighborhoods. I do this because someone has to, and it might as well be me." There was flour on his cheekbone, and without thinking, I reached up to brush it away. Our eyes met, and the air between us went electric, charged with weeks of proximity and careful distance. He leaned in, I leaned in, and the timer went off, shattering the moment. We both laughed, nervous and relieved and disappointed, and finished making dinner while something unspoken hung between us, growing heavier with each passing hour. But reality had a way of intruding. His phone never stopped buzzing. My clinic kept calling, wondering where I was, if I was coming back. The news played constantly now. He turned on my TV, something I never did, and the reports were always the same. Violence in the city. Gang warfare. The Salvatore family and the Castellano family tearing each other apart, while law enforcement scrambled to contain the damage. "Did you order that?" I asked one night, watching footage of a burned-out building, 3 bodies being carried out in bags. "I ordered protection for my people. They chose to respond with violence." His face was granite, unreadable. "This is who I am, Elena. I won't apologize for it. I'm not asking you to. And I wasn't, I realized. I was just trying to understand the weight of what I was choosing, because somewhere in the last 5 days, I'd stopped pretending I was going to walk away when this ended." The call came on the 6th morning. I was making coffee when his phone rang, and I watched his face transform as he answered. Color drained from his skin. His hand gripped the counter so hard his knuckles went white. He spoke in clipped, furious words that needed no translation. When he hung up, he just stood there, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" I crossed to him without thinking, my hand on his arm. "They found my sister." His voice was hollow. "Salvatore's people. They have Teresa, her husband, the kids." Everything stopped. In all his stories, Teresa had been the thread of humanity running through his narrative. The little sister he'd sacrificed everything to protect, who'd married a good man and had babies and lived far away from the violence that defined his world. "I have to go," he said, already moving toward the bedroom, toward his things. "You're not healed yet. Doesn't matter. I watched him grab his jacket, check his gun with practiced efficiency, and something crystallized inside me. "Then I'm coming with you." He turned, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked truly afraid. "Absolutely not. You need medical support. If that wound reopens—" "Elena, no. You've done enough. More than enough. This is my world, my fight." I stepped closer, forcing him to see me, to really see me. "Why would I do this? Is that what you're asking?" "Because I can't let you die. Not after everything. Not now." Something cracked in his expression, but before he could respond, engines rumbled outside. 3 black SUVs pulled up to my cottage with military precision, and men emerged, 7 of them, all hard edges and barely concealed weapons. This was his world, his real world, and I was about to step fully into it. Angelo was the first through my door, late 50s with silver at his temples and eyes that had seen everything. He stopped short when he saw me, then looked at Dominic with raised eyebrows and a small smile. "So you're the daughteressa he won't shut up about." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Angelo." "Enough." But Angelo was already assessing me the way I imagined he assessed everything, for utility, for weakness, for potential threat. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he nodded once, decisively. "She's got spine. I like her." My cottage transformed into a war room within minutes. Maps spread across my kitchen table. Weapons checked and loaded with casual efficiency that made my stomach clench. Marco, young and intense, barely older than 25, set up a laptop showing blueprints of warehouse districts. Another man I didn't know discussed entry points and extraction routes, while a third checked ammunition counts. And through it all, Dominic commanded with absolute authority, transformed from the man who'd taught me to make pasta into something colder, sharper, lethal. "You stay here," he said when the planning was done, his eyes on me. "Under protection. I'm the only one with medical training," I countered. "If someone gets shot—" "She's right, Dom," Angelo interrupted, and I could have kissed him. "We don't know what condition the family will be in. And you know Salvatore's people. This is going to get bloody." I watched the war play out across Dominic's face, the need to protect me versus the cold calculation that I might be necessary. Finally, he nodded, sharp and reluctant. "You stay in the vehicle. Backup only. You don't enter unless called." I agreed, and we both knew I was lying. The drive to the city took 3 hours. I sat in the back of an SUV with Angelo and Marco, listening to them talk about Dominic in his absence, painting a picture of a teenage boy forced to become a man overnight, who'd spent 20 years trying to reform an organization that didn't want to be reformed. "You love him," Marco said suddenly, catching me off guard. "I don't know him well enough to love him." "You don't need long when it's right." I had no response to that, because he might have been right. The warehouse district was exactly what I expected. Abandoned buildings, broken windows, the kind of place where violence happened quietly and bodies disappeared. Our vehicle stayed back while Dominic's team moved into position, and I watched through thermal imaging as heat signatures bloomed on the screen. Too many of them. At least 15. "It's going to get loud," Angelo said beside me, and I nodded, my hands already checking my medical bag. The explosion, when it came, made me jump despite expecting it. Then gunfire, constant and terrifying, and radio chatter in the language I understood but pretended not to. "They're in the north building," I said without thinking. 3 down. Angelo's head snapped toward me. "You speak Italian?" "I understand it." His expression shifted into something like respect, but then Marco's voice crackled through the radio. "I'm hit," and I was already moving. Angelo cursed and followed, his body shielding mine as we ran toward the chaos. Inside the warehouse, smoke stung my eyes and gunfire echoed off concrete. But I found Marco on the ground, blood spreading across his shoulder, and everything else fell away. My hands moved automatically, packing the wound, applying pressure while bullets flew overhead. Marco stared at me like I'd lost my mind, and maybe I had.
"Jure cresi, dottoressa."
"So I've been told." Then Dominic was there, appearing through the smoke, his face a mask of fury and fear. "What the hell are you doing here?" I looked up at him, my hands covered in Marco's blood. "My job." Something passed between us then, understanding and frustration and helpless gratitude, and he nodded once before disappearing back into the fight. We won, if you could call it winning. Teresa and her family were extracted alive. The Salvatore men retreated. And as dawn broke over the safe house where we'd regrouped, I found myself on a terrace watching the sunrise, still wearing someone else's blood, still shaking from adrenaline. Dominic found me there. He sat beside me without speaking, and we watched the light change for long minutes before he finally said, "You shouldn't have come." "Probably not. This is my life, Elena. Violence. Danger. Always looking over my shoulder. I know. You deserve better. Normal. Safe." I turned to face him fully. What if I don't want normal anymore? His hand came up to cup my face, and his eyes searched mine. "If you choose this, choose me. There's no going back. I chose you when I stitched you up in my cottage. I just didn't know it yet. When he kissed me, it wasn't gentle. It was claiming and desperate and mutual, weeks of tension breaking like a dam. His hands in my hair, my fingers gripping his shirt, both of us breathless when we finally broke apart. "Say Mia," he whispered against my lips. "And you're mine." His smile was rare and genuine and beautiful. "Yes." Angelo's throat clearing from the doorway shattered the moment. "Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we have a problem." And just like that, reality crashed back. But as Dominic squeezed my hand before letting go, as I watched him walk back into danger with that promise in his eyes, I realized I'd made my choice. I'd chosen him, his world, his darkness and his light. There was no going back now. 3 weeks in Dominic's world, and I still woke up expecting to find myself back in my tiny cottage. The whole thing a fevered dream born of loneliness and bad decisions. But the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse told a different story. Bulletproof glass reflecting a city that looked almost peaceful from 40 stories up. The security detail outside our bedroom door was less peaceful. Their presence a constant reminder that normal people didn't need armed guards to sleep safely. Dominic's arm tightened around my waist, pulling me closer in his sleep, and I let myself have this moment of pretending. Pretending we were just two people in love, not a mafia boss and the doctor who'd accidentally saved his life and somehow ended up here, treating gunshot wounds in a medical suite he'd built in his basement for injuries that couldn't see the inside of a hospital. "Good morning, Dotteressa," he murmured against my neck, awake after all. 3 weeks, and that word still made my stomach flip. The charity gala was Dominic's idea of normal, a $1,000 plate fundraiser for childhood literacy, held in a hotel ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and old money. I wore emerald green because he'd laid the dress out on our bed that morning with a look that said this wasn't a request, and I'd stopped fighting him on things that didn't matter. His hand stayed possessive at my waist as we moved through the crowd, introducing me to business associates who smiled with too many teeth and eyed me with poorly concealed curiosity. The woman who'd tamed Dominic Castellano. The doctor who'd appeared from nowhere and somehow earned a place at his side. Teresa was there with her husband, her children safely at home with guards Dominic trusted, and seeing her gave me an anchor point in a sea of strangers. She squeezed my hand when we passed, a moment of understanding between women who'd chosen to love dangerous men. The bathroom was marble and gold leaf, empty when I entered, my heels clicking against tile. I was washing my hands when the door opened behind me, and I knew before I turned that something was wrong. The woman who entered was elegant in the way that came from generations of wealth, her black dress simple and perfectly cut, her dark hair swept into a chignon that probably cost more than my old car. I recognized her from the photos Dominic kept in his files. "Mrs. Salvatore." "You're Elena," she said, not a question. "The doctor." I dried my hands slowly, buying time. "Yes. You seem like a smart woman." She moved to the mirror beside me, checking her lipstick with casual precision. "Too smart to chain yourself to a dying empire." My pulse kicked up, but I kept my voice level. Is that a threat? A courtesy? Her eyes met mine in the mirror. Women like us shouldn't be caught in men's wars. Something hot and sharp rose in my chest. We are men's wars. That's what they never understand. She turned to face me fully, and for a moment, surprise flickered across her carefully composed features. Then something like respect. Perhaps you deserve what's coming then. I was already moving when the explosion hit. The blast was distant but powerful enough to rattle the bathroom fixtures, to send me stumbling against the sink. Mrs. Salvatore was gone before I could blink, disappeared through the door like smoke, and I was running after her on instinct, my medical training screaming that people would be hurt, that I could help. Dominic found me in the hallway, his hands on my shoulders, his eyes wild with something I'd never seen in them before. Fear. Are you hurt? He was checking me over with frantic hands, and I realized he was shaking. I'm fine. What happened? Car bomb. Parking garage. His jaw was granite. Not our car. But close enough. The ballroom had erupted into controlled chaos. Security herding guests toward exits, people crying and calling loved ones. The professional veneer of the event cracking to reveal genuine terror underneath. Teresa and her husband were already gone, whisked away through a service entrance I hadn't known existed. We left through the kitchen, surrounded by a wall of Dominic's men, and I caught a glimpse of the parking garage through a service door. Smoke and twisted metal, emergency lights painting everything red and blue. Salvatore's message was clear. He could reach us anywhere. The safe house was different from the one we'd used before, some anonymous apartment in a building Dominic owned through so many shell corporations even he probably lost track. Angelo was there within the hour, his face grim, and I watched as Dominic transformed from the man who'd held me in the penthouse that morning into something colder, harder, infinitely more dangerous. They're escalating, Angelo said, and Dominic's response was immediate. So will we. They disappeared into another room, voices low and urgent, planning something I wasn't part of. I sat on the couch in borrowed clothes. Someone had brought a bag, prepared for this possibility, and tried not to think about Mrs. Salvatore's face, about the timing of her appearance, about how close I'd been to that explosion. You're planning something. I found him later, in the bedroom of this borrowed space, staring out the window at a city that had tried to kill us tonight. It's not your concern. Something in me snapped. I was nearly blown up. It's my concern. This is exactly why you shouldn't be involved. He turned, and his face was the one I'd seen in that alley months ago, the one that had warned me to run. You should go. Get out while you still can. Too late. I am involved. Mrs. Salvatore knew my name. She knew who I was. The color drained from his face. What? I told him about the bathroom, about her warning, and watched fury build behind his eyes like a storm gathering force. You should have told me immediately. I'm telling you now. They know who you are, Elena. What you mean to me. They'll use you against me. Good. Let them try. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Neither do they. About me. We stared at each other across 3 feet of space that felt like miles, and I watched something break in him. Some wall he'd been maintaining crumbling under the weight of too much fear. I can't lose you. The words came out raw, unguarded. Everyone I've ever loved. My father, my mother. I almost lost Teresa. I can't. I crossed to him, taking his face in my hands. You won't. You don't get to make that promise. Not in this world. Watch me. We didn't solve anything that night. We just held each other in the darkness and pretended the world outside couldn't touch us. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, and I answered without thinking. Hello, Elena. Or should I say Sarah? My blood turned to ice. I knew that voice, had heard it in nightmares for 3 years, had run across the country to escape it. David. Surprised to hear from me? He sounded pleased with himself. You're all over the news, sweetheart. Standing next to Dominic Castellano at that charity gala. Imagine my surprise. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. How did you find me? You found yourself. All those cameras, all that footage. Did you really think you could hide forever? Couldn't breathe. 3 years of careful anonymity, gone in one careless moment of standing beside Dominic in public. We need to talk, David continued, about the money you stole, and about my partner. You remember him, don't you? The one you killed. The world tilted. I didn't. He attacked me. He died, Sarah. 2 days after you ran. And I have proof it was you. I found Dominic in his study, my whole body shaking, and the words spilled out in a rush. My real name. Chicago. The abusive relationship I'd fled. The partner who tried to stop me from leaving, who I'd defended myself against with a kitchen knife, who I'd thought survived. I killed someone, I finished, tears streaming down my face. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to save lives. Dominic was silent through my entire confession, his face unreadable, and I waited for judgment, for disgust, for him to finally see me as the broken thing I was. Instead, he took my face in his hands. You defended yourself. Against a cop who was attacking you. I ran. That's guilt. That's survival. There's a difference. His thumbs wiped away my tears. Elena, Sarah, whatever name you use, you're the same person. The one who saved my life. Who chose me despite everything. You're not angry? He laughed, bitter and short. Tesoro, I've killed more than one man. Who am I to judge? That's different. Is it? We both did what we had to do to survive. David wanted to meet. Alone. Dominic's response was immediate and absolute. He's not leaving this city alive. I should have been horrified. Should have argued. Should have found some way to resolve this that didn't end in more violence. But I was tired of running. Tired of being afraid. Tired of letting my past define my future. I want to face him, I said. The coffee shop was my choice, busy and public, witnesses everywhere. I arrived first, took a seat with my back to the wall the way Dominic had taught me, and waited. Angelo was in a van outside, monitoring the wire taped to my ribs. Marco sat 3 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. 2 more of Dominic's men were scattered throughout the shop, invisible until you knew to look for them. David walked in looking older than I remembered, harder, still radiating the casual menace that had kept me trapped for 2 years. You look good, Sarah. Expensive. He sat across from me, smiling like we were old friends catching up. What do you want, David? The negotiation was brief. Money he claimed I'd stolen. Information about Dominic he wanted to sell to the FBI. A threat disguised as an opportunity for witness protection if I just betray the man I loved. When he grabbed my wrist, trying to force me to leave with him, muscle memory took over. My knee found his groin with all the force Dominic had taught me to put behind a blow, and then Marco was there and Angelo, and David was screaming threats while being arrested for assault by actual police officers on Dominic's payroll. In the SUV afterward, shaking from adrenaline, I let Dominic pull me against him. He's going to keep coming, I said. No, he won't. I understood what he meant. Should have felt horror. Felt only relief. What does that make me? Mine, Dominic said simply. It makes you mine. And I protect what's mine. I'm sorry I lied about my name. Sarah, Elena, I don't care. You're you. That's who I love. The words hung between us, first time spoken aloud, and I realized we'd crossed another line, ventured deeper into territory we couldn't map our way back from. I love you too. There was no going back now. There never had been. Not since that storm-soaked alley. Not since I'd chosen to save a stranger's life and lost my own in the process. Or maybe found it. I still wasn't sure which. 2 weeks of peace felt like a gift I didn't deserve and shouldn't trust. David's death was ruled accidental. A fall. A tragic collision of skull and concrete that left no questions for anyone who didn't know better. The evidence he'd claimed to have vanished like smoke. The Salvatore family went quiet, which should have been a relief but felt more like the silence before thunder. I fell into routine because routine felt like safety. Morning coffee with Dominic, his hand wrapped around mine while we watched the sun rise over the city. Days treating his men, stitching cuts, setting broken fingers, prescribing antibiotics for infections they couldn't explain to emergency room doctors. Evenings with Teresa's family, her children calling me Aunt Elena, their laughter filling spaces in my heart I hadn't known were empty. "Move in permanently," Dominic said one night, after Teresa and her family had left, after we'd cleaned up dinner dishes side by side like any normal couple. "Not just staying. I mean officially. I'm already here. With a ring." My hands stilled in the soapy water. "Are you proposing?" "Not yet." His arms came around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "But soon." Hope was dangerous in our world. I knew that, but I let myself feel it anyway. The warning signs were there if I'd been willing to see them. Angelo's tension, his jaw tight during meetings, his eyes tracking Dominic with something that looked almost like resentment. Security protocols tightening daily. Dominic's phone ringing at all hours. Conversations he took in other rooms with the door closed. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked on the 13th day. "Nothing you need to worry about. Don't shut me out. I'm protecting you." He pulled me close, and I felt the fear underneath his certainty. "There's a meeting tomorrow. With Salvatore. Potential truce." Something cold slithered down my spine. "That's good news. If it's real." Couldn't sleep that night. Dominic held me close, and I felt his wakeful tension, both of us pretending the other had drifted off. When dawn came gray and unwelcome, I made a decision. I found Marco in the kitchen, already awake, already armed. "I'm coming to the meeting." "Boss said no civilians." "Boss doesn't get to make that call." I met his eyes. Teresa told me about Dominic's father. How he walked into a meeting thinking it was safe. How he didn't come back. Marco's face went carefully blank. "Boss will kill me. Boss will thank us when we save his life." The abandoned factory sat on the edge of the industrial district like a rotting tooth, all broken windows and rusted metal. I watched from Marco's SUV as Dominic, Angelo, and one of the younger guards walked inside. Salvatore arrived minutes later with his own small contingent. Limited numbers. That's what they'd agreed on. 3 each. Neutral territory. Everything about it felt wrong. I couldn't hear the conversation through the dirty windows, but I could see body language shifting. Initial hostility melting into something that looked like agreement. Documents exchanged. A handshake that made my shoulders drop with relief I didn't trust. Then Angelo's face changed. I saw it happen in slow motion. His hand moving to his jacket, the gun appearing, the barrel pointed directly at Dominic's chest. I was screaming before I realized it, but they couldn't hear me. The SUV's windows rolled up, and Marco was cursing beside me, already reaching for his radio. "It's a setup. Angelo's. I can see that." Marco's voice was ice. "We need backup. There's no time." I was out of the vehicle before he could stop me. Gun in hand. The one Dominic had taught me to use on quiet afternoons when I'd argued I didn't need to know, and he'd insisted everyone in his life needed to know how to survive it. The weight was familiar now, almost comforting. I went in through a side door Marco had pointed out during our surveillance, my medical bag abandoned in the SUV because I wasn't going in as a doctor this time. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. Inside, smoke hung in the air, and I could hear Angelo's voice, cold and certain. "Nothing personal, Dom. But you've made us weak. All these rules, these reforms, we're losing money while you play saint." I moved through shadows until I found Salvatore's son, young and arrogant, standing apart from the others. My gun pressed against the base of his skull before he could turn. "Everyone stops," I said, loud enough to cut through the tension. "Or he dies." 6 faces turned toward me. Dominic's horror and pride fought for dominance on his face. Angelo looked almost amused. Salvatore went pale. "Da Teresa," Angelo said. like he was addressing a child. Don't be stupid. Stupid was trusting you. Everything happened at once. Dominic used my distraction to disarm Angelo, their bodies colliding in brutal violence. Gunfire erupted. I was pulling Salvatore's son toward the exit, my gun still pressed to his head, when the world exploded. The blast threw me forward, and the last thing I remember thinking was that I should have told Dominic about the baby sooner. Should have told him 3 days ago when I'd seen those 2 pink lines and felt my entire world shift on its axis. Then nothing. I woke to beeping monitors and Dominic asleep in a chair beside my bed. His hand wrapped around mine even in unconsciousness. His face was a canvas of violence. Black eye, split lip, arm in a sling, but he was alive. We were both alive. Elena! He was awake the moment I stirred, his good hand cupping my face. Thank God. I thought, the baby? I gasped, panic overriding everything else. Is the baby? He froze. What baby? The doctor who came in wore a carefully neutral expression as she checked my vitals. Mrs. Doe, everything looks good. The fetus is fine. 6 weeks along. You're very lucky. Dominic's face had gone sheet white. After the doctor left, silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You're pregnant. I found out 3 days ago. I was waiting for the right moment. A baby. He said it like he was testing the word, seeing if it would break. My baby. Are you angry? His laugh was half-sob. Angry? Tesoro, I'm terrified. He knelt beside the bed despite his injuries. You could have died. Both of you. Because of me, because of my world. But we didn't. Because of luck. Not skill. Not planning. His hand found my stomach, pressing gently against where our child grew. I can't do this. Can't risk you. Can't risk our baby. Cold dread washed through me. What are you saying? You need to leave. Go somewhere safe. Away from me. No. Elena. No. We're in this together. That was before. Before a baby. Before I watched you run into gunfire and nearly die. His voice broke. I'm the reason you're in danger. I'm the reason I'm in danger. I chose this. I choose you. I'm not leaving. Even if staying kills our child? The words hit like a physical blow, and I saw him immediately regret them. But they hung between us anyway, sharp and unretractable. Then I guess you'll have to watch me live. I pushed myself up despite the pain, despite the protests of my battered body. I'm not fragile. I'm not weak. And I'm not your damsel. I'm your partner. We do this together or not at all. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I learned from the best. Something in him cracked, and he pulled me close, careful of my injuries, his face buried in my neck. What if I can't protect you? What if I can protect you? Marco brought news that made Dominic's face go hard. Angelo was in hiding, protected by Salvatore. The organization was fractured. Time was running out. Then we end this, Dominic said. Completely. We take them both down and build something new. I was the one who suggested using their alliance against them, planting information to make each think the other was betraying them. Dominic looked at me with something like awe, and I realized I'd become someone I wouldn't have recognized 6 months ago. Someone who planned betrayals over breakfast. Someone who'd shoot to kill if necessary. Someone who'd do anything to protect her family. The trap was simple. Leak information that I was hiding at the old clinic, vulnerable and alone. Angelo took the bait, arrogant enough to come himself. I was waiting when he walked in, and his smile was cold. You always were too brave for your own good. And you were always a coward. Dominic's made us weak, he said, circling me like a predator. Love makes you weak. No, I stood my ground. Love makes you strong. That's what you'll never understand. His gun came up, and I heard Dominic's voice from behind me, calm and lethal. I agree. Enough talking. 2 men who'd been like father and son faced each other across 10 feet of space and a chasm of betrayal. while I stood between them with a baby growing inside me and everything we'd fought for hanging in the balance. Whatever happened next would decide all our futures. The world narrowed to 3 points. Dominic behind me, Angelo in front, and me standing between them with a life growing inside me that neither man knew about until minutes ago. "You won't shoot," Angelo said, but his gun never wavered from Dominic's chest. "You've gone soft, boy. All these reforms, all these rules. Try me. Stop." My voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. "Both of you, just stop. Step aside, Dotteressa." Angelo's eyes flicked to me, almost apologetic. "This doesn't concern you. I'm carrying his child." The words came out steady despite my racing heart. "Everything concerns me." Angelo's gun dipped slightly, shock rippling across his weathered face. For a moment, I saw the man who'd told me stories about Dominic as a teenager, who'd smiled when I'd earned the respect of the other men. Then his jaw hardened. "A baby doesn't change what needs to happen. It changes everything," Dominic said quietly, and I heard the promise of violence in those 3 words. The clinic doors exploded inward, and Salvatore entered with 6 armed men, turning our standoff into something far more deadly. Everyone's weapons tracked to new targets, and I realized with crystalline clarity that I was about to watch people die. "How convenient," Salvatore said, his smile cold and satisfied. "All my problems in one room. We had a deal." Angelo's voice held the first hint of uncertainty I'd ever heard in it. "Deals change. You're both dead, and your organization is mine." I watched understanding dawn on Angelo's face, the realization that he'd been played, that his betrayal had made him a tool to be discarded. His eyes found Dominic's across the space between them, and something passed between them that looked almost like regret. "See," Dominic's voice was soft. "This is what honor gets you in our world." "Help me end this," Dominic said, and it wasn't a command but a request. "Like old times." Angelo's face crumbled, and I saw the man beneath the betrayal, the one who'd loved Dominic's father like a brother, who'd helped raise a grieving teenager into a man. "Forgive me, Dom." His gun swung toward Salvatore just as the first shot rang out. I dropped behind the desk as the world exploded into violence. Dominic was beside me instantly, his body covering mine, and I heard Angelo's voice raised in fury, fighting beside us one last time. The clinic I'd worked in during my first weeks in Cascade Falls became a war zone, glass shattering, bullets punching through drywall, the smell of gunpowder thick and acrid. Through the chaos, I watched Dominic move like violence made flesh, every motion precise and brutal. He was beautiful and terrible, and I understood why men followed him, why enemies feared him. Then Angelo went down. I was moving before I thought about it, crawling across broken glass to where he'd fallen, my hands already assessing the chest wound that was pumping blood with each heartbeat. Too much blood. The bullet had hit something vital. "I'm sorry," he gasped, his hand gripping mine with surprising strength.
"So sorry, dottoressa."
Save your strength. But I knew. I'd seen enough death to recognize its approach. "Tell him," blood bubbled at his lips. "Tell him I loved him. Like a son." "Tell him yourself," I said, even though we both knew that was a lie. "Protect him. The baby. Be the family he needs." His eyes were already glazing, looking past me toward something I couldn't see. Too late for me. Then he was gone, and I was crying over a man who'd betrayed us, saved us, died for us. I found Dominic in the alley behind the clinic, standing over Salvatore's prone body, gun aimed at the older man's head. His finger was on the trigger, and I knew if I didn't stop him, he'd pull it. "Don't." He didn't look at me, his face carved from stone. "He tried to kill you. Our baby. And he failed. We won." I moved into his line of sight, forcing him to see me. "Don't let him make you into what he is." His finger trembled on the trigger. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Finally, he lowered the gun and drove his fist into Salvatore's face with enough force to snap the man's head back. "That's for my family." The hospital was different from the last one, cleaner, quieter, filled with doctors who asked no questions because Dominic paid them not to. The baby was fine. I was fine. We were alive, and Salvatore was in custody, and Angelo was dead, and somehow the world kept turning. "I'm done," Dominic said, sitting beside my hospital bed, his hand wrapped around mine. "Done with this life, this world, all of it." He looked at me, and his eyes held a certainty I'd never seen before. "I almost lost you today. Again. I can't keep doing this. What about your people? Teresa's husband will take over. He's good, smart, and he doesn't have my father's blood on his conscience." His hand moved to my stomach. "I have something more important to protect now." 6 months later, we lived in a house overlooking the ocean in a town too small to have a name, where no one knew who Dominic Castellano used to be. I watched him paint our daughter's nursery in soft yellows and whites, watched him learn to be something other than what he'd been raised to be. He was terrible at it in the beginning. Kept checking locks 3 times, kept his gun within reach, jerked awake at unfamiliar sounds. But slowly, day by quiet day, I watched him remember how to breathe without expecting violence. We debated names over morning coffee and evening walks along the beach. Isabella after his mother. Maria after my grandmother. Marco earned consideration too, a memorial to friendship and loyalty and men who died protecting what they loved. Labor came on a Tuesday afternoon, 14 hours of pain that left me wrung out and transformed. When they placed our daughter on my chest, tiny and perfect in hours, I watched Dominic cry for the second time since I'd known him. "She's perfect," he whispered, his finger tracing her impossibly small hand. "You're both perfect. We made her," I said. "Despite everything, we made her." Isabella Maria Castellano had her father's dark hair and my hazel eyes, and when she gripped Dominic's finger with her whole fist, I saw him fall completely, irrevocably in love. 3 years passed in a blur of first steps and first words, of midnight feedings and afternoon naps, of building a life from the wreckage of our past. Bella learned to speak in a mix of English and the language Dominic taught her, calling me Mama and him Papa, running through our house like she owned it. I was 8 months pregnant with our second when Dominic knelt beside me on a Tuesday morning, our daughter playing in the other room, the sun streaming through windows that had no need for bulletproof glass. "I asked you once if you'd stay," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "You said yes. I asked if you'd have my baby. You said yes." He opened the box to reveal a ring that caught the morning light. "Now I'm asking you to marry me. Make it official. Be my wife. Forever." I was crying before he finished, pregnancy hormones and love and 3 years of earned happiness all spilling over at once. "Yes. Always yes." Bella came running when she heard me crying, her small face scrunched with concern. "Why Mommy crying? Happy tears, sweetheart," I managed. "Because Daddy gave her present?" Dominic lifted our daughter into his arms, the ring now on my finger where it belonged. The best present. We walked on the beach that evening, all 3 of us with the 4th on the way, Bella running ahead to collect shells while Dominic and I followed hand in hand. The sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the ocean whispered against the shore, and everything was so perfectly ordinary that sometimes I still couldn't believe it was real. "No regrets?" I asked. "Not one." "You? Only that I didn't save you sooner." He pulled me close, careful of my pregnant belly. "You saved me exactly when I needed it." Bella's voice rang out across the sand, calling us to see her latest treasure, and we ran to her together. This family we'd built from violence and choice and stubborn, impossible love. We'd both been running from something once. Now we were running toward everything that mattered, toward morning coffee and scraped knees and bedtime stories, toward a future where the past couldn't touch us, toward each other with every breath and choice and day. The storm that had brought us together was long past. What remained was sunlight and laughter, and the promise of tomorrow stretching out before us like an endless beach, waiting to be explored. Together.